We're asked to choose the graph of this inequality. And so the first thing I notice when I see this inequality is that it's linear, and I recognize that it's in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form, let's just write that down real quick. Slope-intercept form is, and I'm going to put an equal sign here, mx plus b, where m, coefficient of x, sorry, I can't draw an m for some reason. That's terrible. M is equal to the slope, and I'm also going to write that as rise over run. So rise over run, because that's how we're going to use the slope. And the b represents the y-intercept of the graph. So the y-intercept. All right. Now, this one's been kind of flipped around. This is the B here, and this is the M. And I know that because the coefficient of X is the M. All right. So they just switched it around here, but make sure you know that M is the coefficient of the X. So my M is equal to 2/3. Right. And again, I said we're going to use rise over run with that. So you rise 2 and you run 3, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then the b, the y-intercept, is equal to -2. So the graph crosses the y-axis at -2. Now, one other thing before we start looking at the answers here that I want to go over is when you're graphing inequalities, you graph them almost exactly like you graph equations with two main differences. So one difference is sometimes you use a solid line and sometimes you use a dashed line. And you can see that from the answers. If you look, this one has a dashed line, this one has a solid line. Okay, so how do you know which one it is? Well, if you have greater than or less than, I did that totally backwards. If you have less than or greater than, then you use a dashed line. Okay. If you have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, then you use a solid line. So here we don't have a line under the inequality, so we know this is going to be a dashed line. So right away, we know our answer is either A or D, okay? Because those are the two that have dashed lines. All right, so let's go back to our slope and our y-intercept. So when you're graphing these, the first thing you want to do is graph the y-intercept. And remember, we're only looking at these two, A and D. So the y-intercept is -2. So that's where it crosses the y-axis. So that has a y-intercept of -2. And this one has a y-intercept of -2. Okay, so now we go to the slope. The slope is positive. So a positive slope gives you an increasing function. That means going from left to right, it increases, it goes up. So A is a positive slope, whereas D is a negative slope. So we know our answer is going to be A. We can do one more check just to make sure. Go back to our slope, the rise over run. And so starting from the y-intercept, the -2, it should be that if I rise 2 and then run 3, I end up on the line. So starting here, if I rise 2, so up 2 and then over 3, yep, it hits the line. So that confirms that the slope is 2/3. Now, one last piece, we don't need to know this because we've already figured out this is the answer. But the other thing that makes inequalities different is the shading. So when you're graphing an equation, you don't shade. So let me just show you real quick how you determine which side to shade on. And basically, you're either shading on the top of the line or on the bottom of the line. And the way you figure out which side is you pick a point on the graph and you plug it into the inequality and see if that point is a solution to the inequality. See if it makes the inequality true. Now, the easiest point to pick in what I usually have students pick is 0, 0. Unless the line goes through 0, 0, then you'd have to use a point either above it or below it. But in this one, I can use the point 0, 0. So if I go back, so let's take our equation. So y is less than -2 plus 2/3 x. And I'm going to plug in the point 0, 0 and see if it's a solution to the inequality. So I plug in 0 for x and 0 for y. And so when I do that, I would get 0 is less than -2 plus 2/3 times 0 is just going to be 0. So really what I end up with is 0 is less than -2. And 0 is not less than -2. 0 is actually greater than -2. So since this is not true, that means 0, 0 is not a solution to the inequality. And so since 0, 0 is not a solution, that means the solutions are on the other side of the line. And that's why this side is shaded here. Okay, so that's graphing inequalities. Hopefully that helped you out. Keep working hard, and you will master the math.